Warpugs, I saw this pop up on my feed and I was just like instantaneously done. There is no question if I wanted to see this or not, and I have a feeling that you guys would want to see it too because, you know, a good majority of my audience are guys, okay? About 7% of you are women. I'm sorry. You know, this is a guy thing. We think about Rome all the time. At least once a day, one of us is thinking about Rome, okay? I'm just saying. Weirdness. Anyhow, what if the East falls and the West survives? Now, granted, the chances of this happening are, considering the problems that the Eastern Roman Empire was having, the chances of them actually living, surviving, are massively slim. You're talking a series of catastrophic emperors, one after the other. You're talking a series of agricultural problems, a series of migrations, a series of just... It is surprising it didn't fall apart sooner. It was being kept afloat just by momentum, and when that momentum staggered, it was done. Warpugs, we're gonna have a look at this. It's Alternate History Hub. It's Cody. Check the links in the description below. Let's just jump right in. I want to see where he's going to go with this because it's not so much about, you know, how this entire thing would go as far as the scenario itself for me. It's how the avoidance of the collapse of the Eastern Roman Empire would have happened. Let's get right into it. I don't know if he's going to go into that, but I don't know if he's going to say, forget it, there's no way to stop the East from falling apart. Don't quite know what we're going to do with this, but we'll find out. It's going to be an interesting scenario no matter what. Warpugs, Alternate History Hub, go subscribe to him, subscribe to me if you haven't already. Let's get into it.
In the 4th century AD, Rome was still Rome.
Yes.
Kind of.
Kinda.
The empire stretched from the highlands of Britain to the
He has done some stuff with this.
deserts of Mesopotamia,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't the unified ironclad juggernaut of Caesar's time. Instead, it was increasingly two empires in one body.
Yep.
One half Latin, the other Greek. One half crumbling, the other thriving. After centuries of civil wars, invasions, and general bad decisions, Emperor Diocletian tried to fix things by splitting the empire into two administrative zones, and his successor, Constantine the Great, doubled down. In 330 AD, he founded a new capital in the east, Constantinople, built on the ruins of the old city of Byzantium, a more defensible, strategically placed Christian city that would act as Rome's new eastern heart. And it worked, for a while.
Yeah.
This video is sponsored by Aura. Man, whichever way you go, east or west, some Rome is gonna get the short end of the stick.
Yep.
While we don't have to worry about Goths sacking our capital anymore, we do have to worry about a far greater threat.
Oh.
Scammers.
Oh.
Scammers now have such easy access to our information thanks to the internet and dark parts of the web.
Yes.
Which is why a great tool to keep your details safe is this video's sponsor, Aura.
I can attest to this. I use Aura. I have used Aura for about 7 months now, and Aura actually sponsored the channel for a little bit here. I need to reach out and see if that is still available. If it is, I'll put my if it is, I'll do my own run on this. But yeah, Aura was they were great. They have continued to be great. They have been outstanding. They have been an outstanding service. I've used their VPN a lot. I've used all their other tools a lot.
One way
Highly
scammers
encouraged.
get your info is through companies called data brokers, whose entire model is to sell your personal info. Legally, they're supposed to remove that info if asked, but they'll sure make it a headache.
Yep.
Intentionally turning the whole process into a convoluted mess. That's where Aura comes in. They deal with the headache for you, negotiating on your behalf to remove that info from the web and stop those companies from selling your info. But Aura isn't just for harm reduction, it's for harm prevention as well. With Aura, you'll get alerts if your information is spread on the dark web, fraud alert for your credit cards and banking, 24/7 monitoring to keep your info secure, a secure VPN with antivirus, and US-based support that's around the clock.
Yep.
So my family literally just had a scam call where someone impersonated the police and said that we missed jury duty. If we didn't pay the fine, we would be going to jail. Fun fact, the police will never contact you about jury duty.
Right.
I knew it was suspicious, but we still needed to contact the actual police to make sure.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, the caller knew my family's personal info and who to call. So that's why I got Aura right away. This is not just a sponsorship, I just don't like scammers.
Right.
By using my link in the description, aura.com/althist, you can try Aura for 14 days free. That's more than enough time to get some info off the web. That's aura.com/althist. At least the Goths didn't steal personal information.
Yeah.
Over the following decades, the balance of power shifted eastward. Constantinople had proximity to rich provinces like Egypt and Asia Minor. It was far from the vulnerable Rhine and Danube frontiers. And it had emperors who, for the most part,
Didn't
actually
suck.
stayed alive. Meanwhile,
They didn't suck and they stayed alive. Yes, that's a very good point to make about them. God, that is sad that the job requirements to be a successful empire don't have your emperors suck and they have to be living after 6 months.
the West was not so lucky.
No.
Plagued by rebellions, economic trouble, and waves of migrations across the Rhine and into Gaul, the Western Empire limped along. Italy was fading, Gaul was fracturing, and Britain was cold.
Yes.
By the mid-4th century, the Roman Empire was effectively bilingual, bicultural, and bipolar. The eastern half spoke mostly Greek, had strong cities, gold-based coinage, and a robust trade network, while the western half struggled with debased currency, rural decline, and emperors who were frequently assassinated, overthrown, or simply irrelevant.
Right.
But it wasn't a done deal. Despite the cliches, the West didn't fall in a day, and the East didn't survive just because it was better.
Right.
It survived because it got lucky, especially in 378 AD. That year, Eastern Emperor Valens led a Roman army to confront a mass of Gothic refugees and raiders near the city of Adrianople. The battle was a disaster. Valens ignored advice, attacked without reinforcements, and the Roman army was annihilated.
Oof.
Valens himself burned to death in a farmhouse, surrounded by enemies. In our timeline, this was a shock, but not the end. The Eastern Empire bounced back. Theodosius I was appointed emperor, reformed the army, negotiated with the Goths, and ensured Constantinople would eventually be ringed by the famous Theodosian walls. What if Constantinople, vulnerable and young, was the next target after Adrianople? What if the Goths marched straight to the capital and the city fell? Well, that's our divergence.
Don't ask.
Point. In this alternate timeline, the East collapses before it really became Byzantium.
Okay.
And with the richest half of the empire gone, the West, battered, isolated, and written off by history, is suddenly all that's left. Welcome to a world where Constantinople burns, the West survives, and Rome never falls. If you were making a list of top 10 Roman defeats, Valens at Adrianople would be somewhere near the top.
Yep.
Probably wedged between Cannae and Teutoburg. In the year
Cannae is at the top for me. Cannae is at the top. Cannae was such a monumental beatdown. It was...
378 AD, the Roman Empire faced a problem. The Goths, displaced by the rampaging Huns, had crossed the Danube and requested asylum. Valens, emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, agreed to let them settle in the Balkans, but forgot to include little details like food, shelter, and not extorting them into starvation.
Oh, that's always an important one.
The result? A very angry group of heavily armed refugees. Eventually, the Goths revolted and began burning their way through the countryside.
Hooray!
Valens, hoping to score an easy victory and some personal glory before his nephew Gratian's army from the west arrived, decided to engage the Gothic force near the city of Adrianople without waiting for backup, without scouting properly, and without water. Because apparently, heat exhaustion builds character.
You will notice one very central theme when it comes to stories like this. When it comes to stories like this one, you see it in other major engagements throughout history. One that comes to mind is Guy Lusignan, and he was the king of Jerusalem. He took his army out to fight Saladin, and quite literally no water to be found, and he had his army pursue Saladin's army, which was constantly supplied with water. Mathematics, people. Arrogance, just unrelenting arrogance, unrelenting belief of superiority, no water, leads to stupid actions.
The battle was a disaster. The Gothic cavalry showed up late, and by late, I mean just in time to absolutely destroy the Roman flank. The Roman infantry was surrounded, crushed, and left to rot in the heat. Valens? No one even found his body.
Yeah.
The best guess is he was burned alive in a farmhouse, trying to hide from his own decisions. In our timeline, the Gothic victory at Adrianople stunned the Roman world, but didn't topple it. Reinforcements came, diplomacy patched the cracks, Constantinople held out long enough to finish a big set of new walls.
Yay!
While the mortar was setting, they systematically rounded up all the Goths, and, well, you know, at the end of the day, the Goths just wanted to get away from the Huns and settle somewhere, which they did, carving out a piece of Moesia for themselves after the battle, where they remained for the next 3 decades. But then Alaric rounded them up and pointed them west, which would ultimately end with the sack of Rome.
Yay!
What if they sacked Constantinople instead? In this alternate timeline, the Gothic victory at Adrianople isn't just a military win. It's a total cascade failure. Constantinople, barely half a century old, doesn't have the Theodosian walls. The tribes lacked the will, the unity, and the siege equipment to take on a proper imperial city.
Right.
But let's take a small leap of faith and push them east.
Okay.
Immediately after Adrianople. Let's say one of the Gothic leaders gets wind of just how undefended Constantinople is. Maybe a few deserters from the city guard. Goths themselves offer guidance. Maybe it's just hunger. Either way, they march. The Goths aren't content with plundering the countryside. They've seen the riches of the imperial cities. They want more.
Yes.
So they march on Constantinople itself. Unfortified, undermanned jewel of the East.
Oh, God. I never really put this kind of crap together. I never did. I never thought about it. I never once thought about it. Oh, wow. Okay, so I thought he was going to talk about ways that the East could have salvaged its position, but no, it's just a different direction for the army of the Goths.
And they sack it. Brutally, quickly, completely. The Eastern Empire, just 50 years into its independence, collapses like a house of bricks without mortar.
Right.
The imperial court is dead or scattered. Bishops flee west. The bureaucracy implodes. Tons of ancient manuscripts are tossed into the pyre. Massive bronze statues created by the same sculptors who made the Colossus just melt away. This Gothic fanfic is a tragedy for humanity, but for the West, this is the luckiest break in Roman history.
Really?
Sometimes, if not all the time, history comes down. And in 378 AD, the timing couldn't have been more precariously perfect. On paper, the Eastern Roman Empire was the rich one, the stable one, the one with cities that hadn't started crumbling yet. But in 378, it was also overexposed, undermanned, and totally overconfident.
Okay.
The Balkans were on fire, literally, with Gothic raids. Anatolia was wealthy, but lightly defended.
Okay.
Syria and the Levant were politically loyal, but had no meaningful military presence. And Egypt? Egypt was the empire's breadbasket.
Right.
But it was 1,000 miles away.
Egypt had been Rome's breadbasket for a very, very long time at this point.
And Constantinople was the only thing holding the distribution system together. The truth is, Constantine really knew what he was doing. He saw the potential in the East and bet everything on it. A ton of the resources and mines of the West were moved to the previous hamlet with a prime beachfront. This was the gravitational center the East needed to bring it all together. So when the Goths sack the capital and the imperial bureaucracy implodes, the result is immediate. The provinces start falling away like roof tiles in a storm. There's no emperor,
sucks.
no orders, no pay for garrisons. Governors start declaring independence or striking deals with local warlords. Persia takes Armenia while pretending it's a peacekeeping mission.
Yay!
Egypt cuts ties and installs a bishop as governor. And Anatolia becomes a free-for-all of city-state leagues and opportunistic generals.
Doesn't surprise
What
me.
used to be the most secure half of the empire becomes a jigsaw puzzle of failed states. It might seem far-fetched to look at a place which would get completely battered in a few decades and try to argue why it actually stood a chance.
Right.
But let me take a crack at it. Before he moved to the Bosphorus, Constantine actually built up another capital, Trier. Positioned close to where the Germanic problems were, this was a magnificent city, from where the now only remaining Emperor Gratian held court. Britain was barely holding on behind its Hadrian Wall,
Right.
but everywhere else things were looking up.
The Picts were smashing hard.
Hispania and Italy didn't contribute much, but they had natural borders leading to relative stability. Gaul was becoming more and more urbanized and Romanized, and North Africa was the breadbasket for the West. Lastly, Greece would immediately join up with the WRE.
Would make
This
sense.
new addition would be the first, but not the last. In this alternate timeline, the Balkans are lost. Forever. In a weird
Not surprising.
reversal of history repeating itself, the Goths basically become a version of what the Bulgars were in our timeline. A tribal group of people fleeing from one enemy, which carves up a swath of land surrounded by the Danube, Black Sea, and mountains to the south and west. Yet somehow, the amputation of the stronger of the two arms could lead to an amazing outcome.
Really?
It might stop disease from spreading. You see, the issue of hiring outsiders and letting them handle Rome's security, which is insane by the way,
Yeah.
was as big of a problem in the East as it was in the West. Gratian himself lost his head after his men abandoned him. But why did they do that? Well, maybe because he gave preferential treatment to his Alan soldiers, who routinely made sacrifices to Ares. The disaster of Adrianople was a bit of a wake-up call for the East in our timeline. But here, the total ruination of Constantine's dream acts as an existential catharsis for the West, as tens of thousands of refugees, primarily nobles and clergymen, flood the cities
Wealthy.
of Rome, Ravenna, Milan, and Trier. They all relay the horrors they suffered. But stories of the Goth boogeyman is not all they bring. With them comes knowledge, military expertise, and a better administration.
Okay.
As corrupt as the officials
I was thinking it'd be wealth, but I'm an idiot, so there you go.
were, no one would be able to deny the dangers posed by the mercenary system.
Right.
Just like in our timeline, Goths, Franks, Alemanni would be rounded up, and
Yeah.
you get the idea.
Yeah.
Under a more capable emperor, we could even see the reunification with Egypt, Anatolia, and the Levant right away. But Gratian was a low C-tier emperor at best. Usurpers would still be a thing, of course, but the Roman apparatus would remain, because the majority of the wealth would now be concentrated in the west instead of the east. That means better defenses, manned by well-trained troops, with a lot less reliance on foreign mercenaries. Had Alaric
So Rome often relied on auxiliaries to kind of fill out things, particularly cavalry, in the early days of the empire. But they often relied on mercenaries to fill in different areas where they were lacking. It's not a surprise, and this reliance just got heavier and heavier as time went on. It wouldn't be surprising to see an incident like this cause Rome to revert back to its roots, I'd say, where it wasn't. When Rome first started, they were a lot more paranoid. I'll put it to you like that.
For Attila shown up immediately after this move, it wouldn't make a difference. But the thing is, they didn't. The WRE was cut off from the rest of the provinces by the treacherous Adriatic and a sea of pesky Goths.
Yay!
And even if half of the incursions were halted at the Rhine and Danube rivers, that means that the Huns are far less of a threat, due to the Goths and Vandals acting as a buffer.
Right.
As for the remnants in the east, Constantinople never comes close to the city it became in our timeline. There's a reason why it took so long for Old Byzantium to become a major city, and that reason was Constantine. Without a ton of imperial funding, this is no more than a random fishing village, with a bunch of marbles scattered around. The wealth of Anatolia was all on the western coast, and it's only a matter of time before some nomadic people take it over,
right,
pushing even more refugees west. Antioch and Alexandria, on the other hand, had the means to defend themselves, and would likely splinter into separate mini-Romes. Normally the Sassanids would be a major contender here, but yet again, timing makes things interesting. Shapur II's golden reign was at an end just 1 year after Adrianople, and it would take over a century before Persia got its next great Khan. Plenty of time for a new identity and stable borders to be made. A few years later, in 383, Magnus Maximus, by the way, would still revolt in Britain and invade Gaul. But whether he succeeds or fails, all that means is that overexpansion would not be on the list of problems for the Western Empire. The main mission for the entire empire would be survival. Well, that and,
you know. Oh.
When people imagine the fall of an empire, they usually think in terms of armies, cities, and borders. But in this alternate timeline, when the Eastern Roman Empire collapsed in 378, it wasn't just governors and legions that disappeared. It was bishops, councils, and the entire spiritual infrastructure of half the Christian world. Suddenly, a religion that had been debating whether Jesus had one nature or two had to face the fact that it had no functioning eastern half to keep debating it.
Right.
Let's start with the emperor in the West.
The Orthodox Church just simply doesn't exist.
Gratian. Not the most charismatic of emperors, and definitely not a theological heavyweight, but he had two things going for him. One, he was unusually pious.
Okay.
Two, he was done with paganism. In 376, just 2 years before the Battle of Adrianople, Gratian refused the title of Pontifex Maximus, a Roman tradition where the emperor was the head of both church and state. He also cut state funding to pagan temples and declared Christianity the official religion of the empire via the Edict of Thessalonica. In 382, Gratian issued edicts that removed the statue of the winged goddess Victory from the Senate floor, removed the privileges of Vestal virgins, and confiscated money designated for sacrifices and ceremonies. He declared that all the pagan temples and shrines were to be confiscated by the government, and that their revenues were to be joined to the property of the treasury. Now, let's talk about the Bishop of Rome.
If you were a pagan at this time, it would have probably pissed you off.
The Pope.
Oh, yeah.
In the 4th century, the Pope was one of several patriarchs. He was powerful, but shared his power. Yet in this alternate timeline, after the Eastern collapse, all of that is gone. There are no ecumenical councils anymore. Who would organize them? There's no emperor to convene them in Constantinople. So when theological disputes do arise, and they absolutely will,
Yes.
they all go to Rome. Now, would there be no patriarch in Constantinople? Who's to say? But at least culturally, so early in its history, Christianity throughout the entire world would be solely focused on Rome. And here's the kicker. Without the empire to suppress or standardize them, the Eastern Christian movements fragment hard. Historians flee further east, possibly welcomed by the Sassanids as a counterweight to Roman-aligned Nicene Christianity. Monophysites flourish in isolated Egyptian and Syrian communities. Arians, still popular among the Germanic peoples, gain new momentum, especially among the Gothic conquerors of the East. With no Constantinople to referee the chaos in the East, Christianity becomes more regionalized, more political, and more competitive. Ironically, more Roman in the West. In our timeline, Constantinople shot itself in the foot multiple times in order to stamp out heretics, hosting council after council to debate the nature of Christ, from Nicaea to Constantinople to Ephesus to Chalcedon. Apart from pissing off entire regions like Egypt and Syria over whether Jesus had one nature or two, this also gave so much power to the Bishop of Constantinople, which started a rivalry with Rome, which never really healed.
Right,
Here's
the schism.
the thing. Out of those crucial 4 Eastern councils, only one was held before the Battle of Adrianople. Without that central authority, I see this having only one plausible endpoint. Religious Wild East, where these movements are allowed to spread freely, while there's also a blob of Nicene Christianity in the West. Within a century or two, these various minor movements would morph into vastly different forms of Christianity, causing a cultural rift far greater than the schism of our timeline. Looking at all the calamities in the coming 5th century, I can see some of them doing considerable damage to the WRE.
We would probably, and I mean probably, see something to the effect of the Protestant Reformation, that level of religious difference in Europe with this.
But not enough to take it down. And while the East had one clear capital, the Western one kept on moving around. What that means is that we would likely see greater levels of autonomy and small bubbles, kinda reminiscent of a feudal structure, especially when it comes to Gaul, Hispania, and Italy. I could honestly go a lot further and explore what happens beyond the 1st century, but the goal of having the East fall while the West survives is pretty much achieved here, all with one small change. This is Cody of Alternate History Hub.
I had thought that he would address some of the pre-existing things that happened to the Eastern Rome. I thought that he would talk about an emperor in the East changing or something like that. But the Goths taking Constantinople was not a thought that I had at all. This is why I love channels like this, because it gives you something extra to think about. Why didn't things happen in this particular way? And yes, the fleeing of refugees would bring back so much more that the West could have used to survive. Now, would they have survived the Huns? I don't think so. I'm not sure anything could have survived the Huns as they were coming, because it was just a complete different style of warfare. It was like the warfare that the Huns and the Mongols brought was so alien to anything anybody else was using at that time. It was alien. Yeah, we could talk about that all day long, though. Warpugs, thank you guys so much for checking this out with me. Alternate History Hub, kudos to that guy, because frankly, anytime you start talking about Rome, I'm interested. Check the links in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Join us as a member of Patreon for early access, and I'll catch you guys next time.